Hey butterflies, this episode contains discussions of eating disorders and child sexual abuse. If this doesn't feel safe for you or raises any issues for you, step away, take a breath, and we'll see you in another episode. Or support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which we record this podcast, the Gadigal People of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. The entire idea of this podcast is speaking to people who are completely, unapologetically, boldly themselves, and I don't think anyone meets that criteria more than our next guest, who is Grace Tame. She's an advocate for the survivors of child sexual abuse, an author, 2021's Australian of the Year, and my friends. Grace and I recently shared a stage speaking at the Opera House, and it got me so excited to speak to her more. If we're speaking of bold people, Grace ticks every single one of those boxes. Her way of speaking, her courage, her message, which she shares with so much boldness and so much vulnerability, and how boldly she stands for this message that she speaks for as well. Grace, I am so excited to have you in studio with me today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, so first of all, I want to start off all of my interviews with what you're hyperfixating on at the moment. It could be a person, a thing, a special interest, a food. What are you fixating on?
Oof. Work. My pets.
What pets do you have?
I have a golden retriever, Zappa, named after Frank Zappa. Quite possibly the greatest musician of all time. And a British Blue kitten.
Oh, darling.
Yes, named after Iggy Pop. Also a great musician. And they are brothers. I did not birth them myself, just to clarify. Although they do take after Max and I. And they perform live WWE.
Your cat and your dog do?
Yes.
Love.
Yes. They also sleep side by side.
Oh, so sweet. How old's your dog?
He was born on Easter last year, so he's almost one.
Oh, so they're both little babies then still?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's so good.
Iggy was born last March, so he's one.
Oh, darling.
They're very close in age. Yeah, and we got them a week apart, so they've grown
wow.
up together.
It's been together like almost their whole lives. That's so good. Oh my goodness, amazing. Before we kind of like get into the whole spiel of things, disclaimer, we're both neurodivergent here. So if you want to stim, move, say what you want to say, do what you want to do, be who you want to be, this is a complete masks off zone. So please feel free to be and do and act and speak however you feel so inclined.
I stimulate with soft touch, so...
Which is brilliant. Like, do that. I
hair.
have stim toys in my room that I just, like, I'm constantly just, like, fiddling with, and I always have, like, something on my... I've got a pop-it bracelet on, which is just... I'm always just going at it. So fiddle with your hair, do whatever you want.
Yeah, I take my rings on and off.
Me too. I'm always... Like, rings are just, like, perfect fidget toy.
There's so many things that I do that I... am not conscious of
That you're not aware that you're even doing.
That are stim behaviours, I suppose.
I've done the same thing for the amount of stims that I'm not even aware that I have, and it's not until someone points it out to me that I'm like, what? Like, completely unaware that it's even happening. Like, I had one a while ago where I was just constantly tapping my teeth, and I had no idea I was even doing it. And then, like, my mum was like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I had no idea. No idea.
When I was a baby, I was very placid. I didn't used to cry unless I was in the presence of really, really distressing humming noises. So that's one of my autistic. I'm really sensitive to humming noises and background noise. I can't filter out.
Yeah.
But I was really quite placid, except for the need to have repetitive movement. I was really active. So I was walking really early. I was walking at 10 months and, was always up in my cot. But when I would wake up in the morning, instead of crying in distress, what I would do is click my tongue, and I still do that to stim. So I would go like that.
So interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so funny because that reminds me of when I was a kid. I used to make dolphin noises as a kid.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of like the clicks that dolphins do. But my mum and dad used to call me a dolphin and was like, oh, in her past life she was a dolphin because the stims I had as a baby were all clicking noises, or the little squeaking noises I make was like mimicking dolphins and stuff. The only way I could go to sleep as a kid was by listening to like dolphin calls. Like crazy.
Yeah.
And I wasn't diagnosed until I was 13. How old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was diagnosed when I was about 20, 21 years old, after my psychologist, who I'd been seeing from the age of 16, I'd been introduced to her the day that I disclosed to my higher school about the abuse, the child sexual abuse that had been perpetrated against me by the teacher. She was called to the scene by the principal immediately after I shared the experience with the principal. This psychologist came, and so she was quite familiar with me. I saw her quite regularly. And one day, I mean, it's quite a funny story, I suppose. She gave me a picture book that was sitting on her shelf, called All Cats Have Asperger's. Now, you know, with respect to the fact that Asperger is a Nazi. And that term has understandably been shelved. She handed me this picture book, I think to cheer me up, also quite possibly to test the waters with me. She probably had an inkling. And on one page is a picture of a cat doing something, and then on the corresponding page is a symptom of autism. And by the end of the book, I was in tears, and I was like, well, I'm either a cat or I'm autistic. And it turns out I'm not a cat. So.
You know what? I was handed the same book.
Really?
When you brought this up at the Opera House the other day, I was like, I was biting my tongue. I was like, don't say it right now because that's really bad to speak in front of everyone. When you said that, I was like, I didn't know anyone else had that because that was the only book I was handed. Like my mum was handed all of these like really depressing resources and like these massive textbooks of like, your child's life is over and here's why. And then I was handed this cute little picture book of a cat, and it was literally all cats have Asperger's.
I was devastated.
Right? I was like, oh, cool. So, like, because I thought I was, like, weird and broken and glitched. And I'm like, sick. Now I'm not even human. You're just comparing me to a cat now.
Yeah. And then I was like, going around and looking at cats being like,
hey, bestie.
What are you thinking
sister?
of me? Like, you know, like don't look eyes with me.
We all one and the same.
Yeah. Do you know something I don't know? Like,
but you know, there's like a whole series of those books too. I saw one a while ago. It was like all dogs have ADHD, and I was like, stop, enough. Like,
I explained on my book tour that I've got quite a few metaphors for the way that my neural pathways work. But I was in Perth, and I was talking to someone before we went on stage that night, and I was explaining a couple of different metaphors. One is the like the luge in the Olympics, and then another one I have is like a charter boat of tuna fish on the ocean. And like at any one time, I've got several tuna fish out there going, you know, and I just hope that you know, before I land them, that a seal doesn't come along and take a big chunk out of the side of them.
Oh, I love that.
But thankfully, again, before I went on stage, I was discussing this with someone because that day in Perth, there was a story in the news that a child had been bitten by a seal. And if I went out there, because it was quite what I thought was quite a funny story, you know, if I went out there and, you know, it was like, ha, 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 you know, like a seal came along and, you know, before a seal came along and bit the... it would have been like, you know, that would have gone down like a lead balloon. But that's just, you know, like that's just me and my very strange, dry, deadpan, autistic sense of humour. Just, which I've since learned is like an autistic thing as well. Like there's this like very quirky sense of humour.
Which no one else gets. The amount of times where I've usually at my own expense made jokes about being autistic and being strange and being different, and I'll say this joke to other neurodivergent people and they'll be like, oh my God, lol, like totally get it. And then I'll say this, I was in Islands the other day doing public speaking there, and I kept on making these jokes about being autistic. No one laughed. In fact, someone started crying at one of them, and I was like, oh, no, that, like, laugh at that. That's funny. Like, haha. Like, and it happens. And the amount of autistic people and neurodivergent people that I've met that have the same sense of humor, and I'm like, got it. The typicals don't get it.
Well, also it's where I've found that I have had to be careful is because a lot of how autistic people, you know, learn to fit in with the predominant neurotype is by observing, I guess, more typical social interactions. And what I observe is, you know, humour that's acceptable, I'll then think is, like, I'll be thinking that's the, like, that, oh, that's the same. And then I won't realise that I've crossed that line too far. And often, like, that's rare because I've got my own sort of brand of humour that's like, you know, specific to me, but there's that sort of lack of a filter, and it's not for lack of empathy because, like, I don't know about you, but certainly one of my symptoms or presentations of autism is that I feel empathy very deeply.
Hyper empathy, yeah.
To the point of near distress, because if I'm in the presence of somebody, for example, who's feeling really sad, and they can't explain why they're feeling sad, you know, because sometimes, like, whether you're autistic or not, whether you're neurodivergent like ADHD or not, you know, all of us sometimes as human beings, like, can't put our feelings into words because that's a human experience. And I only read recently, like, that it's very common for autistic people to have anxiety when they can't repair a situation, when they can't figure out what's going on. And I'll get frustrated. And, you know, like, it really upsets me. And I've sort of, like, crossed that line into hot water before with humour that I've thought is sort of just almost like the same brand or like a similar brand, and it's not. And that's another thing as well is autistic people are, you know, often, like, really empathetic, but I don't want to sound like I'm being degrading of us, but not aware until we play our own behaviour back, or someone plays our own behaviour back, of how it can impact,
how it showcases on an outward perspective.
Yeah. And it is because I think because of our different sensory profile, processing such a high volume of information at any one time, that while we're processing that information, it's almost like we can't process our own communication. Does that make sense?
No, 100%.
So while we're communicating something, we're also
ingesting
everything. And that's we're almost like in a permanent state of overwhelm.
Yes, 100%. I've also found as well the amount of time, if I'm experiencing, like, I experience emotions on, like, a 0 to 100 level. Like, I never experience things at, like, 50%.
No.
Like, every single emotion I have is so extreme. Like,
so
if
concentrated.
Yes, and it's like, I found things like disappointment, for example, is, like, my biggest emotion.
Yeah.
Like, and it could be something big, like, you know, obviously with COVID the past few years, the amount of events that have been cancelled and stuff, and really, really feeling disappointed and upset by that. But it could be something tiny. Like, a while ago, my mum said that we were having lasagna for dinner. I hate lasagna. And then she ended up changing it and having spaghetti instead. I freaked out because I was like, we ended up having spaghetti, and I was like, I much prefer spaghetti, but you told me we were having lasagna, and now I'm disappointed because you told me one thing. And she's like, you don't even like that. And I'm like, I know, but I'm disappointed because I had told my brain this thing is happening.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I will get, and like movies being like a movie night, watching a different movie, or plans being cancelled, or even the times changing. Like, disappointment becomes so all-encompassing that it feels like I will never know anything other than that emotion. And that's disappointment, that's happiness, that's sadness, that's anxiety, that's depression, it's any emotion I have, it is so extreme.
Yeah, RSD, the rejection sensitive disorder.
Dude, rejection sensitivity disorder. I didn't even know it was a thing. Like,
dysphoria, sorry.
Yeah, I only discovered it recently, and up until I actually learned what it was, I was like, I just thought I was a dramatic bitch, which I am, but there's a reason for it. And I'm like, oh my God, so many other people are actually experiencing the same thing, and it is such a wonderful, safe feeling being like there is so many. It's the same as when I got my diagnosis. It's like I'm not the only one that's feeling this.
No.
There are millions of other people who are feeling the exact same thing as me, which is such a safe thing to feel. It's like, okay, community, and I'm safe, and I'm not the only one. I'm not a glitch in the system. So obviously accommodation is something that we are fighting the change for, and that is something that needs to be done across the board. First of all, is there any places where you feel like you are being accommodated?
Well, it often depends on the individual.
Of course.
And when I say that almost hearing the negative responses.
Yeah.
If we start accommodating all these individual needs, and I want to make it really clear that autistic needs are not preferences. Preferences come and go. And I made the comment on Sunday at the All About Women event on the panel that we both did, the actually autistic panel. If everyone was on the spectrum, which is a myth that often gets flung around.
We're all a little bit autistic.
Oh, we're all a little bit autistic. Everyone's on the spectrum. Everyone's a little bit on the spectrum. And I said, if everyone was on the spectrum, they wouldn't make lawnmowers sound like that. That you would, and it's really interesting because when there's a need that the predominant neurotype, that neurotypical people need, you notice how instantly it is accommodated by society, and it's things like, for example, one of my autistic needs is that I need visual references. I need to preview spaces. I'm actually really quite an anxious person, even though it might not appear that way. I'm very good at masking. I've had to mask sort of my whole life. So if I get to see an environment before I'm working in there, or if I get to preview question material beforehand, it's not that I'm going to rehearse anything. It's just that I have a visual reference point of it. And that way my anxiety will be diminished, and that's not hard to do. That costs nothing at all, and it means that everyone can be sort of more on board as well, and there's better communication. I am someone who needs face-to-face interactions. I think also as well that's just better for society in general. We see a lot more, I think, disagreement today. Maybe this is just my opinion, but certainly with, social media is both a good thing and a bad thing. And when we're talking about specifically in terms of conflict resolution or problem solving, if we remove that element of face-to-face interaction, while there can be other parts of communication that don't necessarily involve face-to-face communication. If you remove that element of face-to-face communication and just have interaction online and don't have that component, how can you possibly make an assessment on somebody else that you've never met in person? How can you give someone a chance? How can you develop a full picture of a situation, how can you have a nuanced foundational understanding without kind of even shaking someone's hand, giving them a hug, sniff them in a weird like a sensory understanding, not in a creepy way.
No, but I think you're right. I think exactly what you said, accommodating autistic people accommodates everyone. And I noticed that when I was working on Heartbreak, and the directors and creators of the show, the first questions that they asked me were, how can we accommodate you? And I answered, and they were like, okay, it didn't cost them any extra money. It didn't make them go any extra over their budget. It didn't cost them any extra time. And all of my castmates all said that accommodation then overflowed onto them. Accommodating autistic people does not deny anyone. Instead, accommodates and includes everyone.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said ask. And that's the difference. We've come to a point in society where we see a lot more, and I'm trying to avoid speaking in absolutes. This isn't always the case. We see a lot more, and I think this has a lot to do with social media and the way it's framed, because it is so fast-paced, and often there's not enough time, or there's the illusion that there's not enough time for asking questions and for a more nuanced approach. We see a lot more projection. We see a lot more presumption. We see a lot more point mockery. And we see a lot less asking of questions to find out what the specific needs are. And, it's a matter of also just giving options, rather than just having limited choices of just like one or two. Because sometimes the necessary choice for an autistic person is just not there. And if you give someone a selection, like a wide range to choose from, that like if there's too many options, I get overwhelmed and then I choose none. So I'm just like, like a buffet. I'm like, buffets freak me out. But, if you ask someone, well, what do you need to make you feel safe? What are your needs? That will often produce the outcome of a better situation. I think as well. I'm just trying to think about what are more common autistic presentations or symptoms. Like noise is one that's really, really common. Like soundproofing environments and removing background noise. I certainly. For me, look back on, it just all makes sense. I was I was a really enthusiastic student. I really loved to learn, but then I really struggled when I had to do the listening component, the auditory component of a lot of exams. Or I really struggled when there were outsourced exams, when we moved to a different environment and suddenly all the classes were amalgamated and, the seating arrangements were different. Suddenly we're all, in individual seats instead of at our tables. Yeah. Suddenly it was just completely different. And that might not be a big deal for, a neurotypical student, but to an autistic student, that is a need, and that's an unmet need, and the anxiety goes through the roof.
100%. I think as well, we've come a very long way in terms of accessibility and accommodation, but we still have so far to go. But I think as like a kind of little wrap up, I think the biggest thing that people and society and businesses can do for autistic and overall inclusion is ask the question. And if you see someone using noise-cancelling headphones or bringing a weighted blanket with them or having fidget toys or acting in a way that doesn't make sense in your idealized version of normal, it doesn't matter. I think.
Yeah, why does it hurt you? Why does it hurt you that I don't? Yeah. Why does it hurt you that I don't cut my hair? Why?
Or that I move this way, or that I speak this way. I think that's the biggest thing. I think accommodation is such a big thing, and we have so far to go in it. But it starts off with understanding and accepting that our world is diverse in so many aspects, and accepting and embracing that diversity and going, this person is different to me. That's fine. It's not hurting me. Let people live, which I think is the biggest part of inclusivity.
And the consequences of objectifying, of shaming, of blaming, of minimizing, of outright denying autistic needs is so incredibly harmful, and it's revealed in statistics. Like Dr. Jack, who is brilliant, by the way, she shared those the other day. They did studies in Sweden that revealed the average life expectancy of an autistic person over there is 54, but here in Australia it's 35.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily because of autism itself. It is because unmet needs have myriad consequences, such as, you know, they manifest in the form of mental illness because they're ignored, they're shamed, they're objectified, you know, they're belittled. And they can also manifest in the form of health conditions, of physical health conditions. Like, again, they will manifest in the form of eating disorders if somebody's genuine, legitimate need for eating to be done in a certain way is not treated properly, is not treated with the care and support that it deserves.
Yeah.
And so, again, you know, and while I have a policy that I don't legitimize certain media coverage. Like the other day, I went to court and then the day after, I was pictured with my hair out, and then there was the insinuation that I had hair extensions. It is because I have not cut my hair since July 2021. Like, these are really important things for the community. You might not even understand that that's an autistic need, and that a lot of people will share that, you know. And so when I advocate for myself in that regard, I'm actually bringing along the community. You know, I went to a talk right after mine, and, you know, it was about the bodies that have been left behind. And, you know, again, it's not just about the bodies, because when we talk about body positivity or the body movement, we're forgetting that it's about minds as well. And again, objectifying is it's so sad that we're having to talk about this in 2023. You know, and again, you know, you can be both privileged and oppressed at the same time. You know, many things can be true at once. And so, you know, until we recognise that these things are community issues, we won't get anywhere at all. And so I'm trying to do this to bring everyone along with me.
You've been named Australian of the Year. You have a memoir out. You've started the Grace Tame Foundation, and you speak of your journey and of your story with so much boldness and just so much truth to it. How do you look after yourself within all of that?
Well, I lean into the community, and I lean into people like yourself. I lean into people like, you know, Amy. I lean into fellow child sexual abuse advocates, and you know, my repetitive movements like running, and you know, everything that you just said about me, I could say about you. You know, the way that you live with such confidence and inspire so many young people. Because, you know, when I was at the Marie Claire Awards and you won your award, and you got up there in your amazing dress with all of these you know, sparkles, and you just lit up the whole room, and my hairs are standing up on end now, and all of my cells are just sort of, if they had faces on them, they'd be smiling from ear to ear. Because, you know, I felt the same way as well when I was a kid, that there was sort of something wrong with me, that I was inherently broken. You know, I did, you know, with respect to the fact that I had a best friend, or have a best friend still, Dom, shout out to Dominic Ubella. We've got 21 years of friendship. We've known each other since we were 7 years old, and you know, he's autistic as well. And granted, we didn't know that the other was autistic at that time. And it's almost a testament to the fact that there is such a thing as autism and neurodivergence, because when you meet someone who's also autistic, when you're autistic, you just feel this, it's like a different level of consciousness that you just instantly, like, you are in this puzzle that you just gel. And, you know, and I'm so grateful to be able to connect with people like yourself, and I know that I am speaking for so many people in you know, not just the Australian community, but you've also just done your tour of Ireland, and you know, all the photos that you shared with so many happy smiling faces out there as well. Like, it's a really beautiful thing to be seeing this representation surging now.
About bloody time.
Well, you know, it's also, and we've got a long way to go. You know, we've got a long way to go in so many areas. Getting all this out there, whether it's, our First Nations people, LGBTQIA plus people, refugees, migrants, and other marginalised groups. We've got a long way to go in so many areas. Our disabled friends and, visibly and invisibly disabled friends, and just getting more like a better reflection of the truth of society in all tiers. In all workplaces, look around you. If you don't see a disabled person working in your workspace, if you don't see a disabled person among your friendship group, because it's 1 in 5 people that live with a disability. It's things like that. But where we are making headway. And so it's leaning into the authentic bonds. It's things like that that really keep me going, and it's working in this job, because every day I'm out there in the community, and I'm getting, excuse my English, getting shit done.
Period. To finish up the interview, I like to finish with 3 boldly me questions, which are just quick rapid fire questions. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, good luck with a quick answer from me.
Right, same. Okay. Number 1 is, what's one song that never fails to make you feel happy?
Oh, Watermelon in Easter Hay by Frank Zappa.
Ooh.
It is mostly instrumental.
Which is who one of your pets are named after. Love.
Great song. Wicked song.
Number 2 is, what is one piece of advice you would give to your 13-year-old self?
Oh, no. There's nothing wrong with you.
I love it.
There's nothing wrong with you. It's not your fault. And eat the chocolate.
Holy shit, I've cried in both podcasts that I've done today. I thought I was going to make it through this one. I get to the freaking fun questions and I start tearing up. Damn, okay. I can't cry in this one. If you were to be any Disney character, who would you be and why?
I did like The Lion King. I really did like The Lion King. Would I be Simba? I wanted to become a lion when I was about 5, and I remember drawing on pieces of cardboard. I got with texture some lions, and I put them underneath my pillow, and I thought that I would wake up in the morning as a lion.
I love that.
Yes, I was about 4 or 5. Yeah.
Simba, there we go. I reckon that's as good an answer as any. Grace, it has been so amazing speaking to you. Go piss, girl.
Thank you.
What an incredible person. I could listen to Grace speak and be with her forever. I feel like there is a million podcasts that we could fill up just with everything that Grace has to say and with the incredible message that she has to share. Unfortunately, we don't have that, but what we do have is Grace's memoir, The Ninth Life of a Diamond Miner. You guys can go and get that now. She is such an incredible speaker, such an incredible writer, such an incredible human being. Thank you so much for listening to Boldly Me. If you liked what you heard, make sure to rate and review the show on your podcast app if it lets you, and maybe tell a friend if you feel so inclined. Most importantly, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and do whatever makes you feel happy. Bye!